Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today we're doing a Should You Back It for Mordred, CMON's most recent crowdfunding campaign. With a little over a day left to go on this project, with 3,800 backers of $437,000 raised, this is one of CMON's less well-performing crowdfunding campaigns in quite some time. It likely will cross $500,000 or get very close as we head into the end of the project, and finally, for the first time in forever, I finally have that all-in pledge covered, because usually when I drop these videos, CMON tends to drop that all-in pledge the next day, but this time, apparently if I wait till like the last day and a half, I can actually finally give you all the information instead of most of the information and hazarding a guess, so we have all that for you today. In any case, Mordred. Mordred is going to be an area control game from CMON Games. It's going to be the newest area control games in a long line of area control games, starting with Blood Rage. Maybe not starting with Blood Rage, is it the first? Most popularly or famous with Blood Rage. We have Blood Rage, we have Rising Sun, we have Ankh, and then we have Cyberpunk 2077 as well. In fact, the designers of Cyberpunk 2077 are some of the designers involved with Mordred, along with the art from Adrian Smith, along with the miniatures from Studio McVeigh. So it's going to share some of the DNA that was present in the Blood Rage, Rising Sun, Ankh trilogies, while having some of the DNA as Cyberpunk 2077 as well. And Mordred is going to be bringing you Arthurian area control to your table, ideally combining, and I'd say ideally because we don't quite know yet, we only have this one play from the Dice Tower, nothing else out there, just very little information as far as the actual experience of the game, but ideally going to be bringing you strategic area control, combined with the typical production value you get from a CMON game, with the miniatures, the monsters, the heroes, the leaders, the factions, the clans, all these various things, combining aesthetic aspects to the gameplay experience, along with ideally tactical gameplay that will give you a game that hopefully you're proud to own. Again, lots of idealies and hopefullys in there. We'll see as we go through it. And before I dive into everything, I will say the two things I will recommend checking it out if you want to find out more about the actual how to play, which I'll briefly cover some of that today, but not a full in-depth, is first of all, the Dice Tower playthrough will have the Dice Tower playthrough is going to be 2 hours of them playing the game. But then also, if you want a bit more condensed and also a bit more focused as far as the how to play, I highly recommend this video from Steven Sarazin over here, the Mordred How to Play full video. He pieced together as much information as he possibly could to present you mostly a how to play, lots of focus on some of the factions, the clans, the abilities, but overall it was a very, very useful video for getting a stronger sense of how to play, at least for myself, more so than the Dice Tower video. But with that, let's talk about Mordred. Mordred is going to be a game where you're trying to gather the most favor. You're going to be trying to gather the most favor in this game. And you're going to be doing so, you're going to be gathering the favor with the various leaders in the game. Gathering favor with certain leaders will give you in-game abilities, but also if having the most favor with certain leaders will give you end-game bonus as well. And you're going to be taking one of 3 core actions across the course of the game using this little action rondelle they have on the board over here. You're going to be taking marching, mustering, and magic. You're going to be moving around the board, adding more troops, and then playing your ability cards, which is where you're going to have this action wheel that you're going to be mindful of, that the action wheel, as you take an action, the more times you take that action, the more it costs. And you're trying to be mindful of taking the actions that work for you versus being mindful of the action economy of the wheel and when players will take their turns as they go through it. Meanwhile, you're going to have asymmetrical clans in the game, completely asymmetrical clans with their own abilities, with their own decks of cards that will give them different things they can do, different abilities, different permanent upgrades, things like that, making every clan a different force to be reckoned with. You also have the leaders in the game, which are not characters you control, rather they are going to be miniatures that you're trying to gather favor with as you go through it. One of them, I believe, I'm pretty sure one of them is Mordred. It's Mordred, Merlin, and Morgana, if I recall correctly, but I could be wrong on that. You're also going to have heroes, Kickstarter extras that are heroes that are, you're going to randomly draft heroes in the game that are going to be different heroes. So if you have a 4-player game, you're going to randomly put out 4 heroes, and then players can take heroes when they take a muster action. The problem is you can only ever take a single hero, which means once you lock in your choice is locked in, you cannot get the others. As the game circumstances change, you may not have the opportunity to get the hero that would have been better for you because you were so eager to get the one that seemed like the right choice at the moment, but they are dead now, they're gone, and you've lost your one hero for the game. You're also going to have all these knights in the game, you're going to have the various monsters in the game, you have a ton of things going on as far as the various different ways additional miniatures in the game are going to interact with your clan as you play through this experience. There's a lot going on over here. Again, I highly recommend the full video from Steven if you want to get a better sense of how everything plays. That's the overview of what's happening with Mordred. Now, there's going to be the pledge levels for this campaign over here. We're going to have 2 primary pledge levels. We have the $110 pledge level, which is going to give you Mordred and all stretch goals. And then we have the Kingly pledge, which was just dropped for $230. That will give you all of the expansions at a $20 discount, which means you obviously should ideally want those because, well, we'll talk about some of those discounts and prices shortly. But those are going to be the 2 pledges, and you do want to factor in shipping on that. On the low end, you're looking at around $35 for each of these. The higher end of the Kingly pledge is a little higher, and obviously that also depends on where you are. But that means that the base pledge of Mordred over here, the Fey pledge over here, is going to run you on the low end around $140 to get this game, versus you can probably get it the retail version for around $70 down the road. I mean, the MSRP is obviously going to be a factor, but if you're willing to wait for it's on sale or hunt it down, you can probably get this game around $70, which means you have to factor in, why is this game going to cost you twice as much to get it over here now, and is it worth the additional risk of not even knowing how well this game is received? Because, well, we'll know a lot more once it actually lands in people's hands and people can offer their opinion on how good or not good the game actually is. But with that, let's go into some of the things that are going on over here, the various stretch goals, the various add-ons, because there are a lot of things over here. There's going to be the Old Enemies expansion for $60, the Warbands expansion for, I believe, $30. In fact, if I scroll down, it should show me, you know what, let's go ahead and we'll look at them all shortly. The Warbands expansion for, I believe, $30, the Forces of Nature expansion for, I believe, $30. Again, I'll find those. We also have a art book for around $25, and then additional things. All of these unlocked. Some of these are going to be Kickstarter exclusive, so the Uther Sarah tokens and the Oberon are going to be additional extras you get in the Old Enemies, although these two expansions, Mordred Warbands and Mordred's Forces of Nature, those are Kickstarter exclusive in and of themselves. So if you want those at all, your options are the secondhand market or the Kickstarter right now. Versus Old Enemies, you will ideally be able to get it at retail, assuming they keep it that way, but you will get these extras over here, this Oberon and the additional Sarah tokens over here, if you get the expansion here, and that Oberon miniature does look fairly cool. We'll go through that as well. Past that, you're going to have stretch goals. All the various monsters. First of all, the first stretch goal you have is a full clan. We have the Gnome faction over here, a full faction to add it to your gameplay, and again, every faction being unique and asymmetric in terms of what they bring to the table, and so that's going to completely add, I believe the base game, if I recall correctly, comes with 4 factions. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to have the 4 factions, the 3 leaders, we're going to have 4 monsters, 4 knights. That's what you get in the base game. That's what you're going to be getting at retail for around $70 if you wait and get this down the road. Versus, we're going to be getting a full additional faction just as a stretch goal, already adding to your gameplay. You're going to be getting 2 knights, so going from 4 knights to 6 knights. So again, 4 factions to 5 factions, 2 knights to 6 knights, 4 knights to 6 knights. The heroes is going to be entirely Kickstarter exclusive. This is not in the base game at all. You're going to have these currently 8 heroes. We do have a few more stretch goals to go, so we'll see exactly where the campaign ends. And I've seen a lot of people talking about the 12 Knights of the Round Table. I'm curious whether CMON does have plans to go up to a full complement of the 12 Knights of the Round Table. I'm skeptical at this point, but we'll see, as well as no Arthur. So will there be an additional, you know what, come on, if you release the optional gameplay all in, and you do release an optional buy tomorrow, we're going to have words. We're going to have words, come on. But past that, we have the additional heroes, these 8 heroes, like I mentioned already. Those are going to be something that you're going to add random heroes equal to the player count to the game, and you're going to have the opportunity to muster those heroes instead of a regular unit. That's going to be entirely Kickstarter exclusive to this version of the game, as opposed to getting that at retail. So the first thing you're going to be heavily missing out, because so far, you know, getting an extra faction, an extra 2 knights, that doesn't really math out to paying double as much for the game. You're also going to have monsters over here. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 more monsters for the game, contrasted with the 3 or 4 monsters. Was it 4 monsters? You got 13 more monsters contrasted with the 4 monsters you get in the retail edition. That's going to give you a lot more monster variety to your experience as far as the different ways these interact with your game experience, which was, well, it gives you a lot more gameplay content. You're also going to have some deluxification upgrades, some hero color bases, which are just additional color bases for your heroes, which are going to be necessary if you're using heroes. We're going to have the various Sarahs over here, as well as those going to be added as well to, again, enhance your gameplay as far as the various leaders you have in play, Mordred, Merlin, and Morgana, to give those upgraded from the Carver tokens, and that's what you're effectively getting for your doubling of your cost. You're going from $70 to around $140 once you factor in shipping in order to get all of that extra. So 1 more faction compared to 4, 2 more knights compared to 4, we have 8 heroes or so, and then around 13 monsters instead of 4. So that's a decent amount of enhanced content, but the doubling of the price primarily is going to go towards those heroes and additional monsters in terms of the ratio of what you're paying for and all of that. Additionally, we have the various expansions over here, and I'm going to go through the expansion in a different tab as I go through these in rough order of my least to most interested. Starting off the bat with the $25 art book. This is a personal preference. I don't get a lot of value from art books. The few times I've decided to get an art book because I really love the art of a game, it has gone on my shelf. I looked at it once and then I never looked at it again, so I only ever get art books nowadays if they are part of an all-in pledge that I think, to me, would enhance my experience. Otherwise, I leave them completely behind. From there, we have the Travel to Distant Shores with the Old Enemies expansion. And this is where the order of what expansions I would recommend, if you get any, is going to change to a certain extent depending on what you're looking at, which might make sense as I go through this. But for $60, you're going to get the Old Enemies expansion, which supposedly has an MSRP of $65. Obviously, a $5 discount is not enough. That will be cheaper in retail well with whatever retail discount you get from your local online game store. But if you do want those extras as well, if you want the Kickstarter exclusive stuff over here, those extras, that's going to be one reason to consider this expansion. The other reason that might be even a bigger reason to consider the expansion is if you are looking at that Kingly All-In pledge, because then you get an additional $20 discount, and the other two expansions are going to be Kickstarter exclusive, and that's where it starts to make a bit more sense whether to get this expansion or not. Primarily going all in. If you're not going all in, I'd probably recommend skipping on Old Enemies and considering, but not necessarily getting, some of the other expansions. Now, the first thing that Old Enemies is going to add that is nearly essential if it's important to you is going to be the 5th player expansion. If you want to play Mordred with 5 players, then the Old Enemies goes to be a much higher factor as far as how much you want it. For myself, I'm less likely to table this at 5 players. There's already enough other games that I get to the table when I have 5, and I rarely have 5, so for me that's not enough of an added value. And very often in games like this, I sometimes find that I have a 5th player expansion, and it doesn't necessarily even improve the gameplay. It often becomes a game variant, a player count that I will just never touch the game at anyway, so who particularly cares? But that's going to be the first thing to note. If you do want that 5th player option, then the Old Enemies expansion is essential, effectively, to go ahead and play with that. Past that, the Old Enemies is going to add a few more things. It's going to add, that's going to be Gaul Island, that's going to be the 5th player expansion. It adds Essence over here, a new mechanic in the game, giving you the ability to tap into Essence, which effectively operates as a catch-up mechanic to a degree, giving players the ability to, it's going to go towards players who have the lowest favor at the end of rounds of battle, and so that's going to be a catch-up mechanic that arguably, if you care about that, I'm pretty sure, and I say this without knowledge, I'm pretty sure you can substitute any tokens you want and simply read the rules of how Essence operates, and ta-da, you now have Essence. So I think even if you want Essence as a concept within your game, you should ideally be able to house rule it. I'd have to look at all the components and rules and everything to see if I'm wrong with that. But in theory, it's just rules and tokens, right? I think. Maybe. We'll find out. You're also going to have Uther over here. Uther Pendragon is back, and he's going to operate as an alternative for the 4th leader. So if you want variety in the leaders and how they operate, if you want to proxy in a different leader as you play through the game, then again, this expansion becomes more helpful. I don't know. Again, I have not played the game, so I'll take all my opinions here with a grain of salt, but I don't know if that's enough of a value to me to prioritize this expansion over others. Then factions-wise, you're going to be adding 2 new factions to the game. The Chiefs over here, it's not the Chiefs, what are they called? What are the factions called? The Hillmen and the, was it Chiefs? No, it was the, let me see, scroll up. The Hobbs and the Hillmen are going to be the 2 new factions added to the game. And again, all factions are going to add variants with the decks of cards and their abilities, giving you just large changes to the experience you're going to have, depending of what combination of factions you have on the table as you play this game. And then lastly, there's going to be more monsters, I believe. If we can scroll through these miniatures over here, there's lots of miniatures to go through. You're going to add new monsters over here. We're going to have the Pixie Queen monster. We're going to have the Green Knight over here. And then we're going to have, look at that. I mean, the sculpts are pretty nice, I'll be honest. Some of the sculpts more so than others, but we have that sculpt over there. We have the Red Cap Druid. There's a whole lot of Red Cap monsters already. And then you have the exclusive bonus, the Oberon over here. This one does look very cool. Look at that miniature. I'm curious about the sizing of this one compared to the others, but it looks a little intense. It looks a little intense. Someone ticked off the wrong tree in the forest. That's all I'm saying over here. It does look a little intense, and I'm sure they particularly chose the very intense looking one for the expansion, for the deluxe one, for the exclusive Kickstarter bonus over here. We also have Uther Ser over here, so if you want to have his as well, if you want to have him match your base game, if you're backing this on Kickstarter and the base game, and you're going to be getting Uther later, as far as you're getting not Uther, you're getting the expansion later as in retail, then granted you will not have those miniatures as well. So again, it kind of is leaning into the, hey, if you want this, you probably should get this. And I think if you're getting the all-in, it makes more sense. But on its own, you have to try to figure out which of those things you care about the most. For me, I'd want the factions the most, and then the monsters second most. I don't care that much about Mordred in general. Did I say Mordred? Is it Mordred? No, not Mordred. Oh my gosh, what's his name? The bad guy's son, Uther. Uther's the one I don't care about that much. And that's going to be what you get over here in the Mordred Old Enemies expansion for $60, or alternatively, bundled into your all-in Kingly pledge. Then over here we have the Rally Your Champions with the Warbands expansion. The Warbands expansion is going to be bringing you 12 more heroes. You already have 8 heroes in the base game, and that means you're going to have, again, in a 4-player game, you'd have 4 random heroes mixed up that are available to play. Over here you're going to get 12 more heroes for $30, giving you a lot more hero variety, as well as the Blight mechanic. The Blight mechanic is going to give you an opportunity, and this is again going back to what I said already, Blight in theory, this is where I'm not as sure. I'm not sure about all the mechanics, the cards and all that stuff, so I don't know if Blight can as easily be proxied in the same way Essence can. In theory, maybe, but I think there's also cards that go along with. But you're going to have 12 heroes, which are going to be, well, 12 heroes that you you add to the game, taking your hero count from 8 to 20, depending on how things change by the end of the campaign. But then additionally, you're also going to have the Blight mechanic, which is a way that you can spend Blight at times throughout the course of the game. You can spend Blight for abilities to get things in the game, which gives you that extra just resource. It's just a free resource. It's a free power. It's a free ability with one small problem, and that is whichever player has the most Blight is simply not eligible to win. Just plain and simple, not eligible to win. This is a mechanic you've seen before, and if you've ever played a game High Society, other games too, but High Society has it, the player who spent the most money as they bid simply cannot win. QE has it, the player who spent the most money cannot win. In Too Deep has a variant of it where the player who has the most corruption gets a point penalty, so they can still win, but they get a high point penalty that they need to have done particularly well to overcome. And I'm very, very curious to how Blight is going to interact with your games of Mordred, because it could be something that is an incredibly cool concept that gets added to your game. It could be, or alternatively, it could completely destroy the player experience. Hopefully they've playtested well enough. This is one of those things like the merge mechanic in Ankh. There are players who love it, there are players who hate it. I imagine Blight will be very similar. The difference is it seems to be entirely built into being an optional mechanic, contrasted with the merge, which is central to what Ankh is. Because in Blight, any number of things can happen. The first of all is, as soon as you realize you're out of the game, if you realize you've spent the most Blight, and you realize there's no chance you're winning, what actions will you take towards the end? Are you even trying for you to jockey for your own position, or is it purely playing Kingmaker at that point? There's all kinds of things that can happen in a game like Mordred when you have a mechanic like Blight. I think it works differently in a 20-minute bidding game like High Society compared with a 90 minutes to 2 hour long experience that Mordred is going to give you. So am I going to play with it? 100% I will. Am I confident that I will always play with it? Very, very not confident as I go through it. That's going to be the Warbands expansion, 12 new heroes, as well as the Blight mechanic to your game. And then lastly, we have the Forces of Nature expansion for $50, not the $30 I said earlier. For $50, you have the Forces of Nature expansion, and this one depends on where I'd prioritize it, because, for example, if you are getting old enemies, then you already have additional factions in the game, plus you have the additional bonus faction for the Kickstarter extras, which means these become less essential. But if you aren't getting any of the other expansions, then having 3 new factions added to the game takes your faction count from the 5 you'll get for back in the Kickstarter to 8 once you have Forces of Nature, to 10 factions if you have all enemies. That's 10 asymmetric clans that are playing in the game with different ways that they operate as far as the different nuances of their own asymmetric abilities that you're going to have in play, the permanent spells, the one-time abilities, all of those. So if you want the fawns, the plain dwarfs, and the wood elves, this is going to give you that additional variety in this faction box over here for $50, which for me I'm definitely interested in. It's one of those things that, again, until I play it, I won't have a firmer sense of exactly what goes on. But we have Elven Stealth, a permanent spell. Do not resolve battles in territories where you have only 1 unit. So if you only have 1 unit left in an area, rather than getting hit on easily, you can actually just, you're stealthy. You're stealthy. That's the benefit. You are stealthy. Or you have all these abilities, the single-use spells and the permanent spells, that will drastically change how each faction plays, and it's something that I am particularly excited for as I play through Mordred, or when I play through Mordred and when I get this game. That's going to be the optional buys. And then lastly, I should probably go to the updates over here. Let's go to the updates. Where are the updates? Lastly, we have the all-in pledge, which was already on that front page. Let's go ahead and show it to you over here. If we go to Better Watch Your Mouth, I think it was in here, maybe, I don't know. Here we have the all-in, the Kingly pledge for $230, giving you a $20 discount. This is gameplay only. This is not getting the art book, so you'd have to buy that separately if you want it. And the flip side is, for those who don't want it, you're not being forced to buy it to get that discount, but you're going to get a $20 discount in anything, which effectively, for me, I consider to be getting Warbands, which is Kickstarter exclusive, getting Forces of Nature, which is Kickstarter exclusive, and then getting old enemies at a $40 price point, plus the Kickstarter extras, which makes it a much more palatable option. So, as far as should you back it, should you not, will it hold its value, all of those things, this shouldn't be a surprise to any of you, but as a command game, this is still going to hold its value. This has thousands of people backing the game, and it doesn't have the immediate appeal as far as, it hasn't done as well as other command games, and I have a variety of opinions around why that is. First of all, I think they dropped this one with very little build-up, very little notice. I think that in general, if you look at this, I mean, it dropped like maybe 14 days ago, something like that, well, 14 days before the campaign started. It had the least build-up from any command game in a long time. It has no IP tie-in compared to, what's the last time Command has done a game that didn't have either a previous existing title from their own library or an IP tie-in from outside there? It's been a while since we've done that. I mean, if you have Rising Sun and Ankh, they're part of a trilogy. If you have Cyberpunk 2077, that has a Cyberpunk 2077 IP, and that one, I think that cost roughly $1 million, if I recall correctly. And so in general, they had Dune that cost $1 million, and, you know, had an IP, the IP of Dune behind it. And so when you have these games that Command has put out, they generally are relying on their pre-existing franchises, you know, Cthulhu Death May Die, Zombicide, all of those things, or you have have an existing IP that's being put on top of it, or you have one of the highest funded Kickstarters of all time, Marvel Zombies, that is literally combining both of those factors. This is the first time in a long time. I mean, if you think about it, for Dune and Cyberpunk 2077 to struggle to cross $1 million, the fact that Mordred, I think they both crossed $1 million, I could be mistaken on it, but the fact that Mordred, without an IP, an historical aspect to it, sure, but I don't think history, especially Mordred, I don't think Mordred sells the same way that Dune or Cyberpunk 2077 does, and so I think the funding total combined with the lower amount of build-up actually does make sense. I think it does, it is in line with the past campaigns and how those area control games have done. CMON as a company have not, they built up a large audience, but usually in cooperative games that involve, or cooperative or head-to-head, we had we Master the Universe as well, but you have these different experiences that are much more focused on, well, not area control. Area control isn't the area that they have primarily done as well. They have a trilogy that's done well. They have Blood Rage Rising Sun and Ankh as a trilogy. Those things have done incredibly well, but then past that, it's not the main bread and butter that they're known for. So I think once you consider all the factors, and I acknowledge this 100%, this is me kind of seeing the numbers and then being like, oh, I guess it does make sense, as opposed to me seeing the numbers and predicting beforehand. Had you asked me beforehand how much Mordred would have done, I probably would have guessed somewhere in the range of 800,000, 900,000, definitely lower than their other IP-based area controls. But again, once you consider it all, I think it does make sense. But past that, I think this game will have an audience. This game does look like it's very much in that Blood Rage genre. If you like that style of game, this is trying to emulate that same thing, which is where the tricky part comes in, because ultimately, how well will it actually deliver on that? Sure, it has very appealing aspects, has a fun little gimmick as far as the map unfolding and revealing new territories halfway through the game. There are different things you can do in the game that are interesting and different, that do make it stand out, but they don't necessarily guarantee it to be better. And so the question is, can they do enough of what people already know and like, while also standing out as being different enough that you really genuinely want to consider playing Mordred when it's time to play a game? Speaking for myself, for example, Ankh is a great game that I like a lot. The only problem is, more often than not, I'm still going to pick Blood Rage or something else off the table, and so how well will Mordred fare both against CMON's own titles, as well as the larger ecosystem of area control games, of which there are so many great area control games. There's Inish, there's Rurik, there's Kemet, there's Cyclades, there's DEI, one of my new favorites. There's a lot of games out there. There's Blood Rage, there's Ankh, there's so many area control games out there that call for your attention, and how well will Mordred hold up over time, although it will be boosted by the production value of CMON. Overall, I still think this will hold its value, though. I think there are enough people who will want this, and I think there's enough game design testament or cred behind this that I think it will definitely be a good game. The question is it a good game, or is it a game that people are trying to hunt down the miniatures and extras and all those things because it wasn't as popular, it didn't get into as many hands? Blood Rage, if you wanted the original Blood Rage monsters when you backed the original Blood Rage, those things sell for way more than people ever paid for them, because people weren't as excited or as on top of their game or knowing what was going on with Kickstarter, and so trying to hunt those down before they released Blood Rage Digital cost you an arm and a leg to get your hands in it, and that kind of thing may well happen to Mordred, because as popular as it is, again, $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at the same time it's not hitting the levels of their prior campaigns. As far as what you should get on top of that, that kind of depends on what your goal is. The holding its value part, that will apply to it whether you're talking about the base game, it's going to apply to it whether you're talking about the all-in as well. The Kingly Pledge or the Fey Pledge, both will hold their value. But the question is, should you get it in retail, should you get the base pledge, or should you get the Kingly Pledge? And that's where it kind of depends on who you are as a gamer. If you are cash averse, if you don't want to spend money on something that you're not sure about, this game's going to run you $140 once you factor it in to get your hands in it, which is a lot of money for an area control game. A bunch of games I mentioned already, you can get several of those games. You can get Inish and Rurik, I don't know, I'd have to do some price shopping, but you can get a bunch of area control games, minimum 2, possibly 3 for the $140 this will cost you, so you have to question whether that's worth it. So if you are cash averse, if you are risk averse, if you're not certain where to go with this one, just wait for retail. You'll be able to get some of the expansion content later. If you get the old enemies expansion, you'll be able to add more monsters, more clans, more factions, more things to the game. And so I think combined with the base game and the old enemies expansion, you can always kind of wait and see what public reception is like of the game and see if it's a game for you. Spend a little bit and get variety to your experience and not worry that much about what you're missing out on. Versus if you do want to get more stuff, I do think that the amount of content you get in the pledge, and even in the base pledge over here, at $140, I think the amount of content you get is still a lot of content. You're going from 4 factions to 5, which drastically enhances your replayability just because of the way you can intermingle those factions. I want more for sure, but it does still improve it. You're going to add heroes to your game, which mix up some of the gameplay. You're going to add more monsters to the game, and so there definitely are things that are being added to your gameplay experience that I think are worth it at that $140 price point, but you kind of have to question, is that worth it? And that's where I'm almost not sure. I think the expansions, I think everything is going to fully thrive the most as far as getting all the expansions, but obviously at that point you're jumping from $140 to paying like $260, $270. You're almost doubling your pledge, but you're more than doubling the amount of content and especially the amount of variety in it. So will it hold its value? Absolutely. Should you back it? Not if you're like risk averse and you don't want to spend a lot of money on an area control game that you're not sure of, but if you are someone who's already interested, then at that point, yes, you'll get a lot more content if you back it, and you'll obviously get the most content if you upgrade to the Kingly Pledge. I mean, even right now with backers over here, we have 1,500 backers at the Fae Pledge, and we have 879 backers at the Kingly Pledge, and I'm curious how many more are going to continue to back. They only just dropped the Kingly Pledge, so I'm curious to see how many will jump up and improve and bump up their pledge overall to one of those higher tiers. But that's everything as far as this campaign. That's everything as far as Mordred from CMON. I like area control. It is one of my go-to genres. I probably am going to go all in on this one. Reluctantly, I've been much better at backing fewer projects lately, but area control is my jam, and the faction variety more so for me on a personal note. Faction variety is the thing that has my attention the most here. I like the idea of just vastly different clans that give me a different playing experience every single time. One of the things I always missed about Blood Rage, or felt was a lost opportunity, is the fact that different factions don't have anything to actually make them stand out, and that almost seems to be one of the driving determinators of Mordred. And so I'm here for it, reluctantly. In any case, until next time, I hope you found this useful in some way, shape, or form. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.